I don't know how feasible this is with my camera setup, but I'm going to try to show you how to remove the bottom and top ports on the Vita-1000 because we're going to be doing a bottom and top mod. So we're going to start with this whole platform is heated to about 144°C. We're just going. To add some flux, the ground areas on the Vita-1000 motherboard are huge, and they're a big heat sink. So I like to heat up the board with a hot plate, which is what it's on right now. And then we're going to add some low-temp solder to all of these joints. And then we're going to bring in the hot air gun. This is a mod that you do have to remove the motherboard for and bring out the big guns. This is not easy to do with just a soldering iron because this thing is a huge heat sink. In fact, let me look at the motherboard and see if there's any soft foam. If there's not, I might bump up the heat a little more on the hot plate. Do we have any soft foam? No, it's all plastic. As long as we don't melt the plastic, we should be fine. So I'm going to bump that up to about 180°C. Honestly. Never mind, let's do 175°C. Let's not go crazy. So now heating it up to 175°C. But before it hits that, we should be able to solder. I'm going to use a nice thick soldering iron tip. This one. It's nice and thick, so it's got a big old thermal mass, so it won't immediately drop. Temperature, as this copper ground plane goes all around, the board sucks the heat out. It'll take a while for it to all hit 170. I don't think it will by the time I finish. Everything but it's fine. What you want to reduce is the temperature differential between the area that you're working and the motherboard. We're going to be applying 330°C with the hot air gun and the rest of the board. When there's a big temperature differential, you can get cracking of the copper traces, and then you'll have funky behavior or the motherboard outright won't work. It's very easy to kill these complicated motherboards by not having proper heating when you're reworking them. Here is the low-temp solder I use. Is it legible? I've actually bumped the hot plate up to 185°C. If I see any melty plastic, I'll dial it down. I'm going to have the soldering iron at 310°C in case you guys want numbers. Even when I'm applying this low melt solder because I want the low melt to mix in with the original solder. Sort of crowd it out. And how well this flows into the joints will tell me a little bit about how much heat we need. And flux. I have to add a little bit more flux, but that is looking good. It went on nicely. Turn this around. It's going to be a lot of heat. I'm going to put it towards me. 185°C seems to be a good temperature, getting the solder to flow nicely. Although it doesn't seem to be enough to melt the solder. On its own, that's probably because of this FR4 board I have on here. I'm still looking for a perfect solution to have a removable plate on top of my hot plate because I just get so much gunk on it from flux and solder. The hot plate underneath just looks horrific, and it leaves gunk and flux on new devices that I work on. Let's turn this around again. This device is a little bit of a nightmare to remove. Yeah, we need more flux. The problem with using this big tip is that I don't want to knock off any of these components. I need to get some of the solder off. That should be enough, and now let's work this side. I always get a little bit on this extra side and this outer side. Oh, that's not good. I mean, it's not horrible. I don't really want to render this port unusable. Flooding it with solder. Let's turn around so I can get to the back of this port. Here we go. I don't know how people get all those great shots when I look at other YouTubers. They just have much better camera setups and a little bit more experience videotaping, I guess. There we go. Looking good. I should have enough. All right, we got the low temp solder on and now it's time to apply the high temp hot air. I actually have my camera where my hot air station usually is, so this is going to be a little annoying. Wish I had those right. Angle nozzles. All right, so I'm going to see if I can get away with 320C. I really don't want to do that. Let's get this situated. So I'm going to come in like this in the corner and lift, but first, I don't even know if you can see that. I'm going to come in the corner right here and try to lift this off like that. First, let's get the heat on. I'm going to try 40 seconds of heat right through now. So I'm going to turn this off. It's right, all right, that was no bueno. A little bit more flux, I really don't see. I could try putting more solder on the corners right there, but I don't see where we went wrong. I'm going to have to bump up the heat, so we're going to try 340. Got very little movement for that. So I'm just going to draw on this flux. I want this thing come off. So, there's the flux. I'm not going to put more solder on, but I will see where the temperature is. I'm going to try 335. It's coming out. There we go. The other one should be much easier. It's a lot smaller. Came right out. Also gonna put a ton of flux. Just let flux smoke. So that's smoke from the burning flux. I don't want to be breathing that in. Oh, that just came out like a butte. All right, well, that's it for now. I'm gonna have to let this board cool down before I do any more reworking. I guess we'll just clean up the pads. I could do that real quick. Let's go to the cool side of the board. Let's clean up these pads. Be careful not to rip up traces while you're doing this. Work nice and slow, spreading the heat. I'm sure a hot plate isn't necessary, but look how much easier it makes everything. I'm desoldering the pads and leaving them nice and flat, so we're going to desolder over here too. It's starting to get cold. I don't want to knock off that component, so I'm going to come in from the middle and then wipe down and out, because there's components on the left and right. There we go. Let this go on over here. One thing you can't get away with this is you need a soldering iron with enough thermal mass. You can get away with not having a hot plate. You can get away with not having hot air, but it's just a lot of work. I could see working on this for a while with just an iron. But there you go, that was the whole removal process, and there'll be a separate video for when I put the components on.